Raider Nation. Thank you for joining us on the Only Nation podcast, brought to you by the Raider Ramble and sponsored by Betway. My name is Heidi, but you may know me as Kevlar Prom Dress or even Raider Ladybug. I'm here with T3 Raider Facts, and we're ready to talk some Raiders football together.
All right, Heidi, it was a loss on Sunday, but it wasn't a total loss. Now it's time to get back up on that horse, so let's do that.
Today on the show, we will be discussing the opening day loss to the Chargers, and then we will look ahead as the Raiders come back home to Allegiant Stadium to face the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday.
Okay, Raider Nation, we would love to hear from you, so here's how you can get in touch with us. Give us a call on the Only Nation podcast voicemail line at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. You can also check us out on the web at onlynationpod.com.
Here's the latest Raider news.
The Las Vegas Raiders came up short in Week 1 versus the Los Angeles Chargers by a score of 24-19. The big stories of the game were the 3 Derek Carr interceptions and the 5, kind of 6, quarterback sacks by the Chargers' defensive front.
Yeah, and over the last day, I've seen the meltdown among Raider Nation about Derek Carr being the worst quarterback on the face of the planet. And, of course, we hear this every year when Derek Carr has a bad game. And this was a bad game, and let's just hope he gets that flushed out of his system. But he did have some good moments, but yeah, he has to shoulder a lot of the blame for this loss. Now, the fact that they were able to make it through the entire game with 3 interceptions and 5, call it 6 quarterback sacks, and still only end up losing by 5 with the potential of winning the game at the end on the road against a really tough division rival many of the pundits had in the top 5 of the NFL. I think that bodes well for the Raiders for this season.
Oh, definitely. And that's how I'm choosing to look at the game, too. It's actually a positive sign that the Raiders were in the game up until the very end. And the fact that the Chargers couldn't put them away speaks volumes about the potential that the Raiders have for the year. I think that Carr is definitely a better quarterback than what we saw. And I know my buddy at our Raiders Club, he was telling me, okay, you need to really let him have it in this next episode. And here's looking at you, Manny. You know, I am not going to let him have it because I do know he's a better quarterback than that. And I know that he's probably as hard on himself as any of these other fans are. But the fact is, he lost the game. And he wasn't the only one that made a mistake. But those 3 interceptions were huge. Every time the Raiders got some momentum and had a chance to come back, he threw the ball away to the other team. And that's not going to win any games. The 5/6 quarterback sacks. Oh, man. The offensive line, I am terrified for them. They are awful. We knew they were bad, but let me put it to you this way. The Raiders used 4 different offensive line combinations and made 6 substitutions. And this was a Week 1 game. And this isn't because of injuries. They did this because it wasn't working. And that is terrifying to me. They're going to get Derek Carr killed. Now, Derek Carr had some happy feet against the Chargers. And that happened because the Chargers defensive front was pinning their ears back and coming for him. And there were a few sacks that were on him or his fault. He should have gotten rid of the ball sooner, or he should have even run a couple of times. But the offensive line was awful. And I think that is part of what contributed to Derek throwing those interceptions. I have no words. I don't know what to say about them. I am worried about them, and I still am excited about the rookies that we drafted and that we signed. And I think that they are definitely going to be a part of the future. But the line as it stands is scary. And I think it affected Derek Carr.
And you're right. I think at least 2, maybe 3 of those sacks were on him. A couple of them were not. And, of course, the offensive line concerns me as it does you. I had made the statement earlier in the season, in the offseason, that I thought that Dylan Parham was probably going to take over as center before the end of the year. He may have to do that sooner rather than later because we found out that Andre James was in the locker room undergoing possible concussion protocol. And, of course, if he's out, that may have to force the rookie to slide over into the center position. So, yeah, lots of mixing and matching with that offensive line. It concerns me they did not bring in a big-name talent, free agent talent, to fill that void at tackle. I think maybe Carmen Versillo and McDaniels and Ziegler felt like they had what they wanted in terms of the guys who are already there in camp. But I question that. I hope I'm wrong, but I hope that that's something that doesn't come back to bite them during the course of the season.
And that's what worries me about only going with 8 offensive linemen. You have one injury, and all of a sudden, you don't have guys to fill those holes. That's why I think they should have kept Alex Leatherwood. Yes, he was going to get Carr killed as the right tackle, but they could have put him at guard and let him play his natural position, and they could have salvaged that pick, or at least for some depth and rotation. But I do understand that sometimes a player just needs a change of scenery. And it's sad that he needed it that quickly after being the number 1 draft pick only a year before.
And you mentioned this, when they started the season, when they got to the final cutdowns and only had 8 offensive linemen, I thought that surely meant that they were going to go grab somebody, a free agent, to fill that 9th spot, because I believe you have to have 9, if not 10 offensive linemen to begin. Now, they did bring Alex Bars back and add him to the practice squad. He was one of the guys who I thought really was going to make the 53-man. But again, going forward, if injuries become a problem or if the inconsistencies continue to arise along this line, something's got to give. We got to bring somebody in either by trade or something. But yeah, I'm worried about Derek Carr's ability to survive this season if it continues on like this.
Yeah, when you said something's got to give, I'm like, I hope it isn't his leg.
Well, I'll tell you what, I feel much better about Jared Stidham being the backup than some of the guys we've had of late.
That's true. The reason why Davante Adams was brought in was to be a major difference in the offense, and he was. Adams was targeted 17 times during the game, and he made 10 catches on the day for 141 yards and a touchdown. It was the first time we all got to see the chemistry between him and Derek Carr, and it was definitely there.
Yeah, and we mentioned this earlier. Derek had to knock off the rust because he hadn't played in any live game action, missing all the preseason. Of course, we didn't see Davante either, but we saw the chemistry between those two guys, which has existed and transcended all the way going back to their Fresno State days. But the fact that Adams was able to come in and do what he did, knowing that he clearly had a target on his back and he was the one that Carr was going to be looking for, a lot of times he just made it look so easy. He was targeted 17 times, had 10 catches, that's mentioned, $141 and a touchdown. If Carr doesn't underthrow that one to him in the end zone, he has 2 touchdowns. And, of course, that could have been the difference in the game. There's lots of others that could have been as well. But I am so happy that we traded those 2 first-round picks for Adams, and I am just looking forward to seeing what he's going to be doing over the course of the rest of the year. Records are going to fall.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I don't think we overpaid for him at all. He was a great acquisition. And, he just is, I want to call it a 2-headed monster with him and Waller, but it's not. It's a 3-headed with him and Waller and Renfro. Then you add Josh Jacobs to it. It's crazy. This offense really shouldn't be able to be stopped. It was stopped against the Chargers, in part, really, because Derek just had a bad day. And he'll admit that loss was on him. The chemistry is definitely there between him and Adams. And it was nice to see it because, hey, they haven't played together in almost a decade, except for when they played together in the Pro Bowl. And you could still see it was there. And it just shows that they're there and it's coming, and the league isn't going to be able to stop them for a while.
Watch out, AFC West.
Absolutely. After receiving a 3-year, $51 million contract extension, Darren Waller went out and played like the top tight end that he is. Waller was targeted 6 times and made 4 catches for 79 yards. Waller averaged nearly 20 yards per reception on the day, And if this is a preview of what we can expect for the rest of the season, then opposing defenses are going to be in trouble.
With a talent like Darren Waller, who can easily play tight end or split out as a wide receiver, and is clearly a wide receiver, number one receiver talent in a tight end's body, you combine him with Davante Adams, and man, you mentioned two-headed, three-headed, four-headed. We got the multiple-headed monster on this offense. But Waller, after having people talked about him during the offseason, about holding out, not being a good teammate, being injured, he's going to be traded, he just kept quiet. He changed out his agent, and they got the deal done. Drew Rosenhaus came in and got the deal done, got him paid, and he just continued to go out and do what he needed to do every day. He hit the field, and as you mentioned, he was targeted 6 times. He made 4 catches. It should have been 5 catches. It should have been a touchdown. That one throw, Derek threw a little bit behind Waller, who had to step on his coverage in the end zone. So that could have made a difference. There's lots of other opportunities where they could have gone to Waller, instead went to somebody else. But I'm just looking so forward to seeing what he's going to do as a legitimate threat. And again, we saw him as the number 1 option last year. He's probably the number 2 option this year, but what a hell of a number 2 option for your offense.
No kidding. That is a problem that most teams would like to have. You know, I agree. He should have had that touchdown. It was a tough pass to catch. It was behind him. But for $51 million, you need to come up with stuff like that. So that's the second touchdown. You know, really, between that throw to Adams and that throw to Waller, we actually should have been kind of blowing the Chargers out if it wouldn't have been for the interceptions and the sacks. But it's great to see Waller in the fold. You know, I do think that his old agent did encourage him to be extra careful with that injury and make sure to not go out on the field too soon. But when he punted Clutch Sports to the curb and signed with Drew Rosenhaus, that was when I was like, okay, he's ready to play ball. He wants to stay. He wants to get this contract worked out. And he did. And it was funny because Drew Rosenhaus said this was one of the most complicated and hardest negotiations he's ever had. And they got it done. I'm glad to see that they did.
And the day that Waller changed agents, he was out on the field the very next day.
Yeah. Amazing how that works.
Amazing.
Jonathan Abram led the defense with 9 solo tackles and 12 total tackles, while Max Crosby had 10 tackles, 8 solo. The Raiders' defense did have 5 tackles for loss, but they did not collect a single sack against Justin Herbert and the Chargers, which was another big key of the game.
First of all, I want to give kudos to Jonathan Abram. He's taken a lot of heat over the offseason from me and from others, and he did not have his 5th-year option taken up by the team. He could very easily sulked, but he came out with a great attitude. He was flying around. He had a lot of leadership evident on the field. But what really concerns me is the fact that neither Max or Chandler got a sack. I predicted that they would combine, they would get somewhere around the neighborhood of 5 sacks during the game. There just wasn't that push from the defensive interior that they needed. And Max was in on quite a few tackles, but they did not get the key sack or the turnover that they needed during the course of the game. That could have made all the difference. There's so many things it could have, but that needs to change going forward.
Yeah, it was good to see Abram out there making some hard hits, doing his job. And, you know, he's playing for a contract. It might not be with the Raiders. Hopefully it's with the Raiders, but he's playing for a contract next year. And so we can look at this as if it's a contract year for him. The same with Jacobs. It's a contract year for him. It's a contract year for Cleveland Ferrell. It was good to see those tackles for loss. Raiders kind of swarmed the Chargers a few times. That was great to see. But not having pressure on the quarterback, it was a problem again. It seems to be a continual problem for the Raiders. And that lack of pressure, you know, caused the defensive backfield to break down a little bit. They definitely had moments of improvement and progress over the last few seasons, but not having that pressure on the quarterback, it makes a big difference in the backfield. And I'm worried about the defensive backfield because they're a little bit banged up. You know, we just put Anthony Avert on injured reserve, and when you're not getting that pressure on the line, it trickles down to the entire defense, and it is a problem.
I almost had that little bit of a nervous tick that I used to have watching the Paul Guenther defense a couple of times when Justin Herbert was flushed out of the pocket and there was no one around him.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to remember all those times when the contain just broke down, and that had a tendency to happen in the Guenther defense. We saw it a couple of times in the Gus Bradley defense. We need to get back to a solid push, sacks, and holding the contain on that defensive line, those three things.
Yeah. Special teams play continues to be a weapon for the Raiders. Daniel Carlson was 2 for 2 in field goal attempts and 1 for 1 on extra points. Punter A.J. Cole had 2 punts for 106 yards. That's a 53-yard average. And the Chargers had 0 punt return yards.
Yeah, and A.J. Cole had the 2 punts. He got the one that he kicked out of bounds for 56 yards, and then, of course, the other one was fair caught. So, again, 0 punt return yards. That's how you turn a punter into a weapon. A lot like Al Davis when he selected Ray Guy way back in the day. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that punter could be a defensive weapon, and that's exactly what A.J. Cole has become. Now, the one mistake that Daniel Carlson did make was that out-of-bounds kickoff, which set the Chargers up in really excellent field position on that one drive. But, again, you got to hand it to Carlson, 2 of 2 for field goal attempts, including the really long one, 1 for 1 on extra points. This special teams play continues to be not only a weapon for the Raiders, but a consistent one, and one that we don't worry about nearly like we used to back in the day.
Yeah, and I love Danny Ice. God, I'm getting tired of watching him kick field goals. I'd love to see him out there for more extra points.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the Raiders special teams, it really seems to be an area that the team has improved in the last few years. Trent Sig, our friend of the show, Daniel Carlson, AJ Cole, they're all pretty much lights out. The entire squad is pretty good. I know Roderick Teamer, he had a nice play. He did have a bad play when he was in coverage later on. But on special teams, he's pretty good. It's nice to see special team coverage, and it's really nice to see AJ Cole. What was his name? Johnny Townsend, the only Raider that's ever blocked me on Twitter. Nice guy, but man, he was not able to make that transition from college to the NFL.
And I was just getting ready to say, when A.J. Cole took over for Townsend, I was thinking to myself, how much better can Cole be than Townsend? Well, he's pretty much shut me up in that regard.
Oh, yeah. He has shut you up, and it is good. All right, let's do a deeper dive on the game. First, we're going to talk about the offensive side of the ball for the Raiders, and then we'll jump over to the defensive side.
All right. Now, we've already talked a lot about the offense, but there's one other thing that I wanted to mention. On offense, Josh Jacobs didn't get the ball a ton, but he did average nearly 6 yards every time he touched the ball on Sunday. Now, this is Josh Jacobs' opportunity to prove himself as a great running back in this league. He's a natural leader, and he is gifted. Now, I was a little surprised to see that the Raiders didn't go to the run as often as I thought they should because of that suspect Chargers run defense. But I think we'll see progress toward that in the play calling next week. The offensive line needs to continue to gel, but Derek needs to use his legs more to get outside that pocket and not try to force the ball to weapons in tight or even double coverage.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the running game. At first, the Chargers run defense was able to stop Jacobs. He was, chipping off about 3 yards per run, and that was containing him. But as the game progressed, he was getting 6, 7, 8 yards a run, and he was really able to make some progress there. If they would have done a little bit more runs by Jacobs, maybe throw in a couple of other runs, maybe a couple of runs by Abdullah, maybe 1 or 2 from White, it could have made a much bigger difference. It was pretty obvious the game plan was to go to Devontae Adams, and even though the Chargers weren't able to stop it, the Raiders had so many more weapons that they could have used. And like I said, Josh Jacobs is in a contract year. He's playing for a contract. And I think that we are going to see him really shine and take advantage of every opportunity he's given. And I agree. The Raiders should have given him more of an opportunity against the Chargers.
All right, now switching over to the defense, I felt like the Raiders' defensive front really got beaten on Sunday. The push wasn't there. Herbert was able to get outside the pocket, as we mentioned, and extend plays for the Chargers. Max and Chandler simply have to start getting sacks. They've got to make those plays up front so that the defensive backs can then pin their ears back and get a couple of interceptions. And those are things that this team needs. Now, I think that they can do those things against Arizona, but now we simply have to see it happen.
Yeah. And there's really not much more to say to that. Max and Chandler have to get on it, but the other guys on the line have to get on it too. I'm a little bit concerned about Billings. I saw that he went down at the end of the game. So hopefully, they will be able to do okay with them. But I'm worried. I am worried. I'm worried about the offensive line. I'm not worried about Derek Carr. I think he's going to be able to get his head back in the game and do fine. But I'm worried about the offensive line. I'm worried about that defensive line not getting that push. And it's something that the Raiders have had a problem with for years and years and years. And they need to get over it. And they need to actually get a hold of the quarterback. He needs to go down. He must, the quarterback must go down, and he must go down hard. Somebody who knows something about football said that once.
Within the first 5 to 10 plays. I can't say it like Al Davis did. But I will tell you this. One thing that I think will energize that offensive line more than anything else is the defense stepping up and getting a turnover and giving them a short field. There's so many times where you see the offensive line come out and they're really revved up to go when that defense gives them the ball. Now, we haven't seen that yet with this team, but let's see what happens when it does.
And that's another key. We need turnovers. Turnovers will solve a myriad of problems for a poor defense. If they can get those turnovers, it makes all the difference in the world.
And I will mention, speaking of turnovers, there was that one instance where the Chargers were close. I can't remember whether they came away with a field goal or a touchdown, but they throw it to their tight end who was over near the sideline, and he fumbled the ball. Now, had he fumbled it through the end zone, well, that would have been a turnover and could have completely changed the complexion of the game. Again, you got to be lucky sometimes. And in this case, they really were.
Yeah, sometimes they were lucky. Okay, and we're each going to give out a game ball. Even though the Raiders didn't pick up the win, there are a couple of players who deserve props.
All right, Heidi, who have you got?
You know what? I've got a guy who had a pretty good game, and he went a little unsung. He was a little bit of an unsung hero. I thought about giving him like an honorable mention for Heidi's hero, but you know what? I think he deserves a game ball, and that is Nate Hobbs. He had some big plays. He ended the game with 9 tackles. He forced a fumble, and he had some big stops. I thought he was all over the field, and he made his presence known. His presence really helped keep the Raiders in the game as long as they did.
That's a really good call. Of course, Nate Hobbs' name has been mentioned many, many times in the offseason. A top caliber player coming in last year as a rookie and doing all that he did and not missing a beat, stepping up and stepping right into that starting lineup and doing everything they needed to do. So I applaud you for that one. The one that I got, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit, actually. This guy was talked about a lot during the offseason. We've mentioned him a lot about the fact that he was coming back from injury. Should he be traded? Was he a bum for holding out? But then he changed his agent. But he's already made it through so many demons with the addictions he's battled. And of course, I can't say enough about the young man, Darren Waller. He came out on fire and as maybe not the primary target, but of course the secondary target after Devontae Adams, and did everything that he needed to do except for just making that one catch that was behind him in the end zone, which if he had made that catch would have been a tough catch. But I would have liked to have seen him make that. That would have been a touchdown that could have made the difference in the game. But he came out after signing the contract. People said, well, is he going to be the same now that he's got the money, now that he's settled and secured? Will he come out and really prove his worth and play the game that he needs to play? And I think he did. He only had the 4 receptions, but he could have been targeted more perhaps, and maybe a couple of the throws that were off the mark could have been on the mark. But I think Darren Waller proved his worth many times over at the very beginning, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do going forward. So got to give a game ball to number 83.
All right, sounds good. And what do you see happening in this next game coming up against the Cardinals, my good friend?
All right, now, like have the Arizona Cardinals, who got absolutely crushed by our division rival foe, Kansas City Chiefs. So looking at the Raiders gave up 24 points against a very good Chargers offense. Now, I think they'll do even better against the Cardinals this week. At least I hope they do. Now, if Las Vegas can cash in a few more times where they didn't before and shave 7 more points off what they gave up last week, well, that all points to a 34-17 victory for the Silver and Black as the team picks up its first win of the year.
All right, and I, again, also have the Raiders as winning. I was just wondering, is DeAndre Hopkins still suspended?
He will not be playing. He has a 4-game suspension, so he will not be back for this game.
All right. The Cardinals still have a lot of weapons outside of him, but he is kind of their Devontae Adams. So it's a big loss for them. But I do see the Raiders coming out on top. I don't think they're going to score quite as much as you say. I think that Carr's going to have a much better week, and the interceptions will be kept to a minimum, and that the score will be similar to yours, but I think it'll be 31-17 for the Raiders. The scoring will be opened up for the Raiders this week, and their defense is going to be able to hold it together a little bit more, and they will be able to shut down the Cardinals again. Hopefully, the Cardinals will be tired of seeing the AFC West by the end of the day.
I know. You just don't like seeing Carlson kick all those field goals, so I'm giving him an extra one. So let's hope it's 34.
I hope it's 34. Actually, right now I'm wearing my Bo Jackson jersey, so that's a great number to aim for. But I do. I think Carr's going to be able to shake off the game, and I think that the scoring is going to open up for the Raiders.
I hope he just goes off.
Yeah, because he's got a chip on his shoulder now, and he wants to prove he can do it, and he needs to. He really does.
They can't fall too far behind either. Every game's critical. So starting out in an 0-1 hole, you pretty much need to win the next 3 games to stay in it.
Yeah, especially a division loss. Okay, I think it's time for another edition of T3's Top 3. What do you got for us, buddy?
T3's Top 3.
All right, here is this week's version of T3's Top 3. Number 1, on Sunday, the Raiders only had 3 penalties for 11 yards. However, 2 of those penalties came at critical times and gave the Chargers some extra breathing room. Now, I'm sure that Josh McDaniels is going to address this if he hasn't already, but things like this can't happen, especially in close games. Number 2, I know that Derek wants to get the ball to Adams and Waller, his 2 top targets, but the interception that resulted in Carr trying to force the ball to Waller in double coverage right at the end of the first half set the Chargers up for the score that put them up 2 touchdowns at halftime. That swing of 7 and potentially 10 or even 14 points was a backbreaker in a close game against a very good division rival. And number 3, the Raiders have several underutilized weapons on offense. Mac Hollins, Foster Moreau, and even Brandon Bolden, who had the really nice touchdown reception coming out of the backfield against the Chargers. I'd like to see more of the screen game against the Cardinals, which I think will open up everything else. And that is this week's Top 3.
You see more of the screen game, and people are going to be back to calling Carr Captain Checkdown.
If he gets the wins, they can say that all they like.
Yeah, they sure can. And it really was nice to see that the Raiders did not fall victim to the penalty bug and put up 23 penalties. That was a nice change, but you're right. Mentally, they can't make those errors and give the opponent some extra breathing room. The pass distribution, I believe that Derek had 7 different receivers that caught catches on the game, which is good. Although I've seen him have games where he has 8, 9, and he's a quarterback that can really spread it around well. So I would like to see him use more of those targets. Like you said, there were underutilized weapons in the passing game, and I would like to see him use that. Don't just look for Adams and Waller. Look for Renfrow. The one time that I think he only had 1 target for Foster Moreau, And it was at his feet, and it was to save his life because the Chargers had pinned their ears back and were after him. It was not a real pass attempt. So let's see, spread it around even more. A lot of those players that did receive a pass, they only received one pass. So let's spread it around a little bit more. And, let's get the ball on the ground a little bit more, too.
One of the reasons why Keelan Cole did not make this roster is because Mac Hollins is a really good number 2 receiver. He's a good route runner, and he's got great hands high-pointing the football, like we all hope that Brian Edwards would. But if he continues to progress, he's going to be a really unsung hero, I think, during the course of the season.
And the one thing that I did want to add, and you kind of touched on it a little bit in point number 2, the swing of 7 and potentially 10 or even 14 points at the end of the half. I did not agree with Josh McDaniels not trying to go for it at the end of the half. I understand why he said, okay, 35 seconds left. We've just had this dagger stabbed in our back, and we don't want to make the gap even worse because we're getting the ball back at the start of the second half. Let's go in, let's regroup, let's get this started that way. But I don't think you should give up. They had 3 timeouts left. They had 35 seconds to go. I think the Raiders should have tried to come back at the end of the first half. And it was disappointing to me to see them just roll over and die.
And the only thing I can think of that is that I think that Josh McDaniels was already starting to think, okay, we need to make our halftime adjustments. And he was anxious to get to the locker room to make those adjustments. I don't know. I don't have any inside information, but it seemed almost that, okay, let's go ahead. Let's bring the team in. Let's regroup, but let's get our sights settled the second half.
And I definitely understand that, but I'm just one that doesn't give up. And I didn't like to see that.
I agree. I think a lot of Raider Nation would probably agree with your sentiment on that.
Okay, give us a call at 904-701-8667. Leave a voicemail or text message at that number, or send in a message via social media, and we'll share your thoughts. And what is going on with Raider Roots this week, T3?
All right. Now, this week, we're going to take a complete look at Super Bowl 37. And even though the result was a blowout, we're going to revisit some parts that are pretty telling for both sides, some things that you may not know. So we're going to go back to early 2003. We're just going to get through it, and then we'll just have to have another therapy session once we start getting through some of those lean Raider years that lie right behind that.
Yeah, I'll have to admit, I was pretty distraught after editing it for you. It was a depressing episode. I have a feeling that's going to happen a lot for the next 20 or so episodes.
Maybe not 20. There's some bright moments in each one, so we're just going to have to find the glimmers of hope that we can find.
I am looking forward to those glimmers of hope. All right, T3, and why don't you give us a test on what we do or we don't know?
All right. It's time for another edition of Did You Know? In this segment, I will ask Heidi and all of our listening audience a Raiders-related question with a list of answers to choose from. It's multiple choice, so give it your best guess. So here is this week's question. Heidi, I feel certain you're going to get this one right here. Derek Carr is one of only 2 Raider quarterbacks in history to throw more than 400 completions in a season. Who was the other? Was it A, Carson Palmer? Was it B, Jeff George, or was it C, Rich Gannon?
Okay. Pretty sure it wasn't Jeff George. Carson Palmer looks appealing because I know he did have that 4,000-yard season. And he threw that back in the day when 4,000-yard seasons weren't even all that common. But I have to go with the cannon. I'm going to call it on Rich Gannon.
You are absolutely correct.
Woohoo!
Rich Gannon threw for 418 completions, which was second only to Derek's 428, which he got last year, which I will mention is a 17-game season, and Rich only did it in 16 games. So there you go. There is your answer. You were correct. You're on a roll. I think that's 2 in a row now.
I am. I think it is. How many completions did Derek have in that 17th game last year?
I'd have to go back and look that up. You caught me by surprise on that one.
Oh, you don't know.
I don't know.
I'm curious to know if it was 28 or 29, or if he had already crossed the 400 threshold in the 16th game.
I'll have to double check on that. I'll have to make a note, and we'll come back with that bit of information later.
Okay, sounds good.
And now, Raider Nation, it's time for Heidi's Heroes.
Flying away on a wing and a prayer. Who could it be?
All right, Raider Nation. I really wanted to pick a hero from the game, but we didn't win. So that's why I gave Nate Hobbs his game ball, and I picked another dude that was pretty dang cool. Albert Magini turned 107 on Monday, September 5th. Family and friends thought more people could enjoy his birthday celebration by hosting it this past weekend at the Santa Rosa Veterans Memorial Building. Magini said he would have driven to the party himself if he didn't give up driving 3 years ago. That was a terrible thing in my life to give up my Porsche, he said. I had a black Porsche. Oh my. That puppy was a great, great automobile. Magini is still mentally sharp, healthy, and relatively mobile. He started using a walker this year. When asked about his secret to longevity, he said, "Well, first, it's the martinis. They help, but I've just been lucky." He said he was lucky because he survived World War II. Magini flew 35 combat missions over Nazi Germany as a navigator in the B-17 bombers and had a lot of close calls. But his service didn't end with the military. He served on the boards of a local college and hospital for decades. Santa Rosa city leaders said the lifelong philanthropist helped raise millions of dollars for local charities. He had a lot of connections since he was a stockbroker and finally retired in his 90s. His entire life was about service to the community, and he's fun. And he's just a really good man, said his niece Carol Magini Wave. Carol said he outlived his younger siblings and his wife of more than 6 decades. She passed away 20 years ago. He's a treasure. He's a treasure because he's a good sport to let us celebrate his birthday when he could say, "Don't bother me." He's a good sport and a kind man, said longtime friend Jean Schultz, widow of cartoonist Charles Schultz of Snoopy fame. Magini said he was thankful so many people and supporters came to wish him a happy birthday. "I'm just flattered. They're so nice," said Magini. And Albert Magini, you are so nice too. You've given your life to your country and community, and that makes you this week's Heidi's Hero. And we thank you for your service. If you'd like to find out more information about this, you can check KPIX 5 News. This was a report by Daw Lynn, and you can find that online.
Excellent choice for heroes. I'll always love to hear stories about veterans or people connected with the military. And of course, we all, during this particular week, we give reverence to all the people that support the red, white, and blue, and all the people that fell protecting our country, and those that were taken away from us way too soon in 9/11, which happened 21 years ago. It seemed like it just a blip in the time frame, but we still remember, and we still cast our honor and our respect to all those who represent this country in so many ways. And we just pause to reflect. And again, Heidi, great pick on that hero. I do have some information for you, which we mentioned earlier. You were asking about Derek Carr's numbers. Before the 17th game last year, he only had 407 completions. So he had 21 completions in the last game. So it's that 17th game that actually put him over the top. So if you look at just the first 16 games, he had 407 completions as opposed to Rich Gannon's 418. So that 17th game put him over the top.
But he had reached the 400 threshold by then.
That's correct. He was at 407.
All right. And that about does it for this week on the Only Nation podcast. If you'd like to help support the show, you can send in a donation at paypal.me/onlynationpod. You can find me, Heidi Stabbert, on social media as @KeblerPromDress on Twitter and Instagram, or Heidi Stabbert on Facebook. You can also find me on YouTube on Captain Jack Rackham's channel every other Tuesday night. And join the DC Wench Peggy Holmes and Andrea Trask on our new name, Silver and Black Ladies Night.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Raider Nation, we want you with us every step of the way during the regular season. So here's what we'd like you to do. Send us your name and address so we can send you some free Raiders swag and podcast stickers. Call us and tell us what you want to know. Throw us an interesting nugget that we can use on one of our upcoming episodes and become a part of what we're doing here. Remember, this is the only nation, and we want you to be a part of it. So call us at 904-701-8667. That's 904-701-8667. Call us now and join the Only Nation podcast family. There are two easy ways to find me on social media. You can send me a tweet at T3_sports703, as several of you do, or you can hit me up on Facebook at Tom, Thom Jones. I want to also thank you for all your continued support of the Raider Roots podcast this week. We'll be traveling back to Super Bowl 37. It may be painful for some of you, but how many teams never make it to the Super Bowl? And the Raiders have been there 5 times. But stay patient because there's a 6th time coming just down the road.
As always, we will look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, everyone, go Raiders.
We are not just a nation. We are the only nation, and we smell playoffs in 2022. Raiders.